This is 7 Local News.
Tonight, the north braces for the biggest cyclone in Australia's history.
Thousands of residents flee their homes in coastal areas.
Has failed to take a bigger hit than Cyclone Larry.
Disaster management teams plan how to pick up the pieces. Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us for this special 7 Local News edition.
Good evening.
Well, thousands of residents from Cooktown to Mackay are bracing themselves for the most powerful storm in nearly a century. Category 5 Cyclone Yassi has been described as the daddy of them all. It's expected to make landfall between Innisfail and Cardwell later tonight, bringing winds of up to 300 kilometres an hour and 700 millimetres of rain. Trent Evans begins our coverage.
Residents woke to news they didn't want to hear. Cyclone Yassi had grown to a Category 5 system and was unlikely to lose momentum on its path to the coast.
The next 24 hours is going to be, frankly, a very terrifying 24 hours.
The storm destroyed the weather station at Willis Island this morning. The automatic weather monitoring gear is built to withstand a Category 5 cyclone. The last recording was a wind gust at 8 a.m. of 190 kilometres an hour.
This is the size of a bloody cyclone, mate.
11 plane loads of patients from 2 hospitals in Cairns were taken by bus and ambulance to the airport and evacuated in army planes to Brisbane in the country's biggest medical airlift. A makeshift emergency room has been set up at Fretwell Park, where a woman went into labour this morning. Hours earlier, the last flight out of Cairns left for Sydney.
You can really feel the fear in town.
Residents have stripped supermarkets of supplies. It will be days, even weeks, before they're stocked again.
I've just topped up with water and whatever I could get my hands on.
Cairns is a ghost town. Water and power in some areas is already off. Many of the evacuation centres are full. Hundreds of locals and tourists have headed to hotels instead.
I wasn't expecting this kind of disaster in my whole life. Unfortunately, we have to stay and we have to wait what's going on.
Police and army personnel spent the morning forcing people from their homes.
We were here for when Larry crossed Innisfail, so that was like a little cyclone here. A few trees down, but nothing like what's coming now.
Boats have been anchored and tied to whatever is available. Residents are prepared for the worst and are hoping for the best. Trent Evans, 7 News.
Townsville has begun to feel the effects as Cyclone Yassi nears the coast. Locals spent the day preparing, with up to 60,000 people evacuated from their homes.
Hordes of people worked frantically. Bags filled as quickly as the sand was dumped. Some brought trailers, all their own shovels, desperate to save what they can.
Not just for our house, trying to help everyone, bringing down bags to everybody.
Pretty worried. Yeah, they've all been evacuated, so we're just protecting what we can at the moment.
More than 70,000 sandbags now protect the city. Whether they'll be effective is anyone's guess.
This is a very serious event and a very serious cyclone.
Around 30,000 homes, or a third of the city, has been asked to evacuate. Most residents say they will go, but they're not leaving their properties unprepared.
Pretty worried about this big storm surge coming through.
That could be as high as 2.9 metres.
The rainfall attached to that, 300 to 400 millimetres over a 24-hour period.
The army cleared the streets, warning of the danger to come.
That you'll be receiving flash flooding in the area. And you're recommended to vacate your premises for that.
Erica Ferguson is taking no chances.
The potential is for sort of total destruction. I mean, that's the worst case scenario.
6 evacuation centres have been set up across the region. They're filling fast.
We're just really scared and worried and that because it's my first cyclone and we don't know what's going to happen.
Some travelled hours, bringing loved ones to safety.
Well, we can't physically hold our roof on, can we? So if we lose it, we lose it.
Those remaining are warned to stay put.
Around 11 o'clock tonight. But despite the horrific wind and rain, it's the so-called storm surge that meteorologists are most concerned about. This is the dome of seawater that builds up from wind drag ahead of the cyclone, which can raise the sea level several metres above the normal tide. Now, if the peak of the surge coincides with tonight's high tide, much of the shoreline will go underwater. So we're desperately hoping for a late arrival. Back to you, Joe.
Thanks for that, Livio. And Livio will have more details on Yassi later in the bulletin. A fierce storm surge could wipe out Townsville's marina tonight, with boaties ordered to evacuate. Businesses along the waterfront are at the mercy of nature.
It was a last-minute dash to the shops. The roller doors came down at Woolworths as dozens stocked up on supplies.
What more can we do? We can't all flock to New South Wales, can we?
The reality of Yassi's fury is sinking in.
I wasn't worried yesterday, but now, getting quite worried.
At the marina, boaties frantically tied down their prized possessions.
Bit of a panic down here, getting all the boats roped off.
Howard Heath and Sampson kissed their home goodbye.
It's quite possible that these pontoons will come off these pylons and there will just be total chaos.
Others toasted the heavens.
And just pray to God that the other boats don't come loose.
A 3-metre storm surge would be devastating.
I'm very worried. I actually feel sick to the pit of my stomach thinking that we could lose the boat.
The winds are really picking up here in Townsville. Castle Hill residents have been warned of a possible landslide, while those along the waterfront fear flooding. Shops are boarded up along the Strand.
We've just taken everything off our shelves and walls inside, and then now we're putting wood up.
But for owners, it's the least of their concerns.
You can always replace the shop, but you can't replace family or friends.
Grace Tobin, 7 News.
Meanwhile, Premier Anna Bligh and authorities in Brisbane are assuring residents the state will support them through this crisis.
A stoic Premier is leading the state through yet another disaster. Fresh from the floods, Anna Bligh is now warning Queensland to brace for Yassi.
Do not bother to pack bags. Just grab each other and get to a place of safety. Remember that people are irreplaceable.
The focus is already on recovery at emergency headquarters in the state's capital. The man in charge of central Queensland and the southeast flood cleanup will now deal with Yassi's wrath.
You're staying in your home, make sure you've got the batteries, you've got the radio, you've found the smallest, strongest room in the house.
Authorities are assuring locals just as they were there for flood victims, Queensland will support the north.
We all stand ready to shoulder this burden with you, not just today, but every day after this event.
And there could be more wild weather on the way. At the start of summer, the Bureau warned similar seasons have produced up to 6 cyclones.
Yassi is our third in 5 weeks, so there is still every possibility of further cyclones forming.
Katie Toney, 7 News.
Well, those who lived through the devastation of Cyclone Larry fear Yassi will be more destructive. High winds and storm surges are likely to pound the Cassowary coast. Locals are taking refuge wherever they can.
High winds pounded Mission Beach this morning. It's a breeze compared to what's to come. Tourists were bussed out yesterday. Those who remain are preparing for a major assault.
We expect to get water through the ground floor of the resort. Expect a few broken windows. Some maybe the odd coconut impaled in the wall.
Around 15 local families are holing up in this underground car park.
We're going to stay here. And then as soon as it's finished, head back home and see if there's anything left.
Here in Babinda, it's eerily quiet. The streets have emptied, as have the stores, and it seems every window in this town has been taped up. In Innisfail, hundreds crowded into the council building, one of 6 shelters on the Cassowary coast.
Main thing is we're here. We're alive. That's the most important thing. We can ask more than that.
Most here lived through Larry, but Yassi scares them to the core.
I'm scared to tell you the truth. I really am on this one.
Most of the locals, they're real tough. They're real tough, and they wouldn't be here if they weren't. After Cyclone Larry.
Authorities urge people to be wary of the dangers.
Even the very simple dangers of actually receiving a cut and not receiving appropriate treatment for it can be very life-threatening.
For the moment, they're as ready as they can be. Brent O'Halloran, 7 News.
Hundreds of people have been turned away from overflowing evacuation centres across North Queensland. Those who made it inside emergency accommodation, including schools and shopping centres, are praying they'll be safe.
They sought refuge but met rejection. Desperation settled in as gates to evacuation centres closed.
It's the first time, it's happened. But anyhow, I've got my daughter.
May Sippy drove more than an hour to find emergency shelter. A footpath isn't what she had in mind.
I'm just worried about my 2 kids because she's only 4 months and I've got a 1-year-old son. I just hope we can get somewhere safe soon.
Locals sat and waited for promised buses to safety, but many felt the cyclone was moving quicker.
We call it DAD, death and destruction, and there will be a lot of destruction.
It disappoints me that we can't look after people, but the risk factor is too great.
Families were split.
My kid's in there and my mum's in there and the rest of the family is out here.
Some evacuated, others stayed behind to face the monster.
I came with my daughter and their children, but my son and my other granddaughter stayed at the house.
This evacuation centre was meant to accommodate 2,000 people. An extra 500 have squeezed in. There's not a lot of room, but those who have made it inside are just relieved to be in here, bunkered down together. John Ryman lived through Cyclone Tracy. He's determined to beat Yassi too.
I'll survive. I'm a survivor.
Evacuees are just praying their homes withstand the cyclone's fury.
I really don't think that we're going to have much of a house left to speak of.
Michelle Rattray, 7 News.
People relocating or being evacuated from the path of Cyclone Yassi are urged to let authorities know. A special hotline has been established for people to register their details. The number to call is 1300 993 191.
The mayors of Cairns and Townsville have warned the damage caused by Yassi could be double the cost of Cyclone Larry. Luke McGarry spoke to Cairns Mayor Val Shear at Warree's Disaster Coordination Centre.
Well, the harsh reality of Cyclone Yassi is just about upon us, and I'm here with the Mayor of Cairns. And Val, what can we expect Cairns to look like in about 24 hours' time, and what preparations are in place?
I expect in 24 hours' time there'll be scenes of widespread devastation. There'll be trees down, there'll be power lines down, there'll be garden sheds disappeared, there may be roofs missing from houses, but the place will look as if it's endured a massive storm, which is what it will have done. We can't predict what it's going to cost because we don't know the extent of the damage at this stage, but we do know that this is of higher intensity than Cyclone Larry was, and it is a much broader front, so more communities are going to be damaged.
Thanks, Val. And we now cross to Townsville, where the Mayor spoke to the local media earlier today.
We haven't seen a weather event like this in total. Certainly the effects north of us will be more than anything we've ever seen before. Certainly the strength of Larry at Category 5, but a much bigger system than Larry. 1971, of course, we had the cyclone through Townsville. I think that was probably Category 3-4. Things have changed a lot since then. The landscape has changed. There's probably been 100,000 extra people come to the city to live in that time. So whilst we can learn from what happened then, certainly we can't let it guide us as to what might happen this time.
And further south, dozens of people living in low-lying parts of the Whitsundays have heeded warnings and left amid fears of storm surges. Power has already been cut to some parts of Airlie Beach.
Winds picked up in Mackay and provided ideal conditions for these kite surfers, but Mayor Cole Meng warns this is not the time for thrill seekers.
Stay at home tonight. We don't want people driving around sticky beaking. We don't believe the wind will be any worse than what we encountered over the weekend with Tropical Cyclone Anthony.
Residents prepared early for strong winds and heavy rainfall, even though the full force of Cyclone Yassi will be concentrated further north. A disaster coordination centre was activated in Mackay as workers boarded up government buildings. Authorities are confident that any inundation from storm surges will be minimal.
We moved our furniture into storage yesterday so that it was out of the path because the house is a bit old and rickety. You never know what could happen. If it comes any further south, we might start getting stronger winds and you never know what will happen. They're unpredictable.
Military aircraft relocated this morning and will ride the cyclone out in Mackay. The damaged breakwall is likely to be battered again.
That the breakwater and the harbour was never built to be a complete cyclone haven, and that's why in these sorts of events ports get closed.
Some businesses and residents are leaving.
Just a few, emergency supplies, all the goods and stuff in the box and all waterproofed and whatnot.
My advice to people is stay tuned, keep off the roads,
and take advice from authorities. If authorities tell you to do something, carry out that command.
With Sunday's communities in the grey storm surge zone are being told to self-evacuate and check council's websites. Matt Adams, 7 News.
Good evening, Lydia Aragano with tonight's weather. Not much left to say except stay inside and don't come out until tomorrow. Everything we've heard so far about Yassi is about to come true. So take a deep breath and stay close to your wireless for further updates. The very latest on Yassi, still Category 5, around 220 kilometres east of Cairns, with a crossing expected between Innisfail and Cardwell around 11 p.m. The cyclone should survive a further 24 hours before collapsing into an abyss of inland rain. Temperatures are becoming quite rain-affected as Yassi approaches, generally moderate with above-average humidity. Now let's look at the satellite loop. There's a cyclone sitting there, has a very well-defined eye, and I think most importantly, it has a much larger core than I've ever seen in a cyclone. So the area of hurricane-force winds surrounding the eye is very, very broad, which means hundreds of kilometre radius, if you like, of potentially destructive winds, as that thing is moving just a few hours away now from the coast. On today's chart, you can see the big storm now, massive system. Now, of course, at the moment, the cyclone warning extends from Cape Flattery to Serena, but the most likely path taken over the next 6 or so hours is between about Innisfail and Cardwell, crossing as a Category 5 system. Of course, it's on the southern side of the storm that you can expect the biggest storm surges, because that's where, in fact, all the wind is driving the water to one side and building up that dome. On tomorrow's chart, very quickly, the cyclone moves inland, dumping loads of rain through the Atherton tablelands and into the central interior. It has to go down 5 categories before we change it back into a low. And on the outlook chart, further into the Northern Territory, continuing to produce lots of rain right through central and northern Queensland. Meanwhile, just a few showers in the southeast. And now the official forecast from the Bureau. In coastal waters from Cooktown to Cardwell, hurricane force winds, that's over 64 knots expected south of Cairns, 30 to 40 knots in the north, and then easing tomorrow. From Cardwell to Bowen, hurricane warning for the morning, but winds easing to 20 to 30 knots during the day as the cyclone heads inland, much lighter on Friday, Saturday. And from Bowen to St Lawrence, we've got strong gales tomorrow north of Serena. They'll ease in the afternoon, and then 20 to 30 knots further south, also easing later. The North Tropical Coast and Tablelands, heavy rain through the night with very destructive winds south of Port Douglas. Conditions should start to ease tomorrow. The Herbert and Noah Burdekin, cyclonic conditions throughout the district overnight with driving rain, generally easing though through the course of tomorrow. The Central Coast and Whitsundays, a tropical cyclone warnings current north of Serena only, but heavy rain should ease tomorrow, just showers expected in the south. Tomorrow's tops 23 to 28 degrees in Cairns, Townsville also 28, Mackay heading for 28 as well. That's all for now, my friends. Stay calm and safe. We'll see where we stand in the morning. Back to the team.